Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum. I'm Jason Romano. Great to have you joining us here today on the show. It is almost college basketball time. The season is upon us, and Jimmy Dykes is our guest today, the ESPN college basketball analyst. Jimmy has been with ESPN for many years, started out in 1995 and was broadcasting there through 2014, and then returned in 2017 and is currently an analyst with ESPN covering college basketball. For that 3-year period that he wasn't broadcasting, he was a college basketball coach, coaching the women at the University of Arkansas, his alma mater. Jimmy came up as a college basketball player at Arkansas under Eddie Sutton in the early 1980s, and then went on to become a coach. Coaching stints with that Arkansas team with Eddie Sutton, as well as Sacramento State, Appalachian State, Kentucky, Arkansas, Little Rock, and Oklahoma State. He was also a former NBA scout with the Seattle Supersonics, the now defunct Seattle Supersonics, from 1991 to 1993. This was a lot of fun talking to Jimmy. I've seen him in a lot of different spaces, certainly at ESPN, but working with the AIA Hardwood Breakfast, Legends Breakfast, that's at the Final Four every year, which is sort of a faith and college basketball presentation. Jimmy, if you follow him on Twitter at Coach Jimmy Dykes, you see that the man is outspoken about his faith. He's unashamed. He does not hide it. And obviously that's very appealing to me. I love when people who are in high platform, high profile spots aren't afraid to be open about their faith, and Jimmy is one of those people. So let's get to know Jimmy Dykes, the ESPN college basketball analyst, joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason, it's good to be with you, man. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing great, and it is awesome to have you here. A story, and you and I have so many people that run in similar circles, I'm sure, and I've worked with you and even booked you as a guest for the shows that I worked on at ESPN, but now we get to talk, and I'm really excited to have people hear about your journey. Let's start, I guess, with just college basketball. Another season is upon us, and geez, we're just a few weeks away now before the start of the college basketball season. How excited are you? How amped are you for this season to begin?
Gosh, it seems like every year, my level of preparation and anticipation for the first game it continues to grow. I've been doing it now for 22 or 23 years, and
yeah.
I'm not in a profession or in a spot in my life at all where it becomes old to me or routine to me. I love digging in, starting about the month of September. I mean, I'm like you. I'm always plugged into my craft and what's going on in college basketball. But just the last couple of months preparing for the upcoming season, just on the phone with coaches and players to keep an eye on and teams to keep an eye on, and how's the new 3-point line going to affect the game? It seems like every year there's different storylines, different things for us to follow, and I expect it to be nothing other than a fantastic run again this year for those of us that work in college basketball in some capacity, and for fans that just enjoy the game.
Yeah, I know it's been 7 or 8 months but when we last saw college basketball, Tony Bennett in Virginia were celebrating as national champs. We had Coach Bennett on about a year ago at this time, so they hadn't won the title yet. In fact, they had just come off of one of the, if not the worst loss by a college basketball team, certainly a 1 seed losing to a 16 seed. I'm curious, you've been around this game a long time. Where does the Virginia Tony Bennett redemption story rank for you and all the different years you've been around basketball, whether it's as a coach or as a broadcaster?
Yeah, I would have to put it number one in terms of, if you just base it on a great redemption story, a great turnaround story, a great lesson in adversity and coming out on the backside stronger, tougher, better, more of a champion than when you entered that adversity. I spoke with Tony probably like you about a year ago, or maybe a year and a couple of months ago, about that loss. And even before the beginning of last season, which they went on to win the national championship, he just had a spirit of thankfulness about him, a spirit of gratitude about him for not for the loss, but for what was going to come out of that loss.
Yeah.
in terms of how it was going to change him as a coach, how it was going to change his players, how it was going to change their program and add to the culture that, he has done a tremendous job of building. And then I was blessed during their championship season of the 2019. I think I actually did 4 of their games. I had him in the Bahamas. I think I had him 3 times after that in the regular season. And all during that year, last year, every time I was around him, I just sensed there was a maturity and a growth individually, as a collective group. I saw them embrace adversity in a way that I had never seen a group of people embrace adversity before. They had a thankful spirit, talking to those players and Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome just specifically about what they learned from it. Even those guys, as young as they were, 21 years of age, they understood that, good things can happen from bad situations. And I really grew as a person being around them, watching them, how they handled themselves and continue to build their culture on serving others and thankfulness and having a grateful spirit, regardless of what they go through. So I was a big fan of Virginia cutting down the nets last year, because I kind of had a little bit of a closer look in terms of what they've gone through and just some talks with Tony. And always great to see. It's great to see how that entire story played out. It's one that all of us will remember probably for the rest of our life.
Yes, absolutely. And I think sometimes too, from a faith perspective, which is what this podcast is about, faith in sports, you see Romans 8:28 being lived out, right? That all things can work together for the good and of those who are called according to the purpose. And I just want to make sure I get the last part in there. But that's true in life. I mean, it's such a great, that's why I love the Virginia story so much, and I like playing the interview that we did with Tony Bennett to people, even re-airing it, because you listen to, this was before the season started last year. Like you said, the gratitude, the fact that he was able to still find joy in what the world and the outside public would perceive as just a terrible, horrible moment, lowest moment, whatever you want to say. But that's true in life. Have you seen that just in your journey? That, man, there's always going to be something good that can come out of something bad.
Yes, and so a couple of thoughts. I think all of us are either coming out of a challenging trial or test in our life, or we're heading into one, or we're in the middle of one. Just kind of that's how life is.
Yeah.
And, being a Christian, being a believer, giving my heart to Jesus, back when I was 12, 13 years of age, there was no promise of tests and trials not coming my way. The only promise was God was going to be with me. And I've seen that play out in my own life. I've seen it play out in so many people, their journey. Tony's a great example of it. But there has to be some intentionality on our end. It doesn't just happen. When adversity hits, good things don't just happen. Like, you have to be intentional about how you're handling this adversity. Are you intentional about keeping joy in your heart, intentional about keeping God in the proper place in your life, intentional about being thankful in all situations, not for the situation, but in all situations? And when you're able to do that, and you're able to learn from others that have done it and put it into practice in your own life, then certainly you see the truth in God's written word and how it just jumps out and becomes magnified in our life. But I think it goes back to what I started answering this question with. There has to be some intentionality on our part to do our part. I mean, we're all told that, move closer to God and God will move closer to you. And there's no greater truth or no greater testing point in that than when life has kind of knocked you down and now you have to respond.
What were some of those moments for you? You said 12, 13 was when you began your walk with the Lord, yet you're still 12 or 13. You have a daughter who's 14. I have a daughter who's 15. We remember kind of where our mindsets are in our teen years, and that faith sort of grows and becomes part of the journey that is being a believer. And sports certainly intersected with that in your journey as you played basketball. You ended up as playing a college basketball or on a college basketball scholarship with Arkansas and Eddie Sutton in the early 80s. And so take us through the journey of your faith intersecting with the journey of sports at a young age.
Yeah, I was. I was very blessed to be a part of some really good teams at Arkansas. I didn't have the playing career or the stats that I wanted, at the end of at the end of it all. But God really blessed me and took care of me during my college years, and my faith really grew, Jason, during the summer in college. Back then, we weren't even in summer school. Like, guys just went home for the summer and got jobs, and they came back maybe for the second semester. But I spent all 4 summers working at a Christian athletic camp in Missouri called Kanakuk Camp.
Yeah, sure.
And my faith really grew there around other athletes at the time that were believers, and took it back to my campus and tried to impact it the best I could at the time. Looking back, I, like everybody else, made mistakes and had decisions I wish I could go back and do differently. But overall, I stayed grounded. I never had just a really downward spiral, walk away from God, lose my faith, let go of his hand time in my life. And I'm very, very blessed, very fortunate for that. But I've also had hard times like everybody else. I mean, my wife and I, we've heard the words from a doctor when she was pregnant: there is no heartbeat. And those can be some really dark, send you in a drought type times. And but through all of that, through as dark as those days can be when you're involved in something like that, and many of our listeners have experienced things like that, or even worse, tragically worse.
Absolutely.
Man, the bottom line is, do you hold on to God's hand, or do you not? Do you let go? And I'm very blessed, very fortunate that I've always held on to his hand. Sometimes the grip was tighter than others, but I've never let go of his hand. At times where I wanted to, there've been times when I've been mad and frustrated, didn't understand, cried out to God, asked him why did this happen? Why is this not happening? And I think that's okay. I think God expects us to share our heart completely openly with him. But it's like having a disagreement with your spouse. I think those are healthy times to have a disagreement / argument, whatever you want to call it. But if you can do it when you're holding their hand, boy, it certainly strengthens the relationship instead of tearing it apart. And that's what's worked for me over the years.
Your story took you from basketball playing with Coach Eddie Sutton to then going into coaching yourself. Is that something you saw early on that was sort of a trajectory, especially early in your journey with basketball, to go into coaching?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. When I decided to be a Razorback, and I'm from Fayetteville, Arkansas, I went to Fayetteville High, but chose to stay here. And I wanted to be under Eddie Sutton because I knew he was a tremendous coach, and I wanted to learn to be a coach. And it projected me right into the coaching profession. When I finished playing, I was a graduate assistant for him at Arkansas. Then I was a full-time assistant, 23 years of age in California, Sacramento State University. Then from there, I went to Appalachian State University. Then I was with Coach Sutton again at the University of Kentucky and Oklahoma State. Got into college scouting and the NBA after that, and wasn't even looking to get into TV.
Yeah,
and was doing my scouting job one night at a college game, and was sitting on press row by someone that worked for ESPN, and we exchanged business cards, and one conversation led to another, and did a handful of games one year, and it just kind of went from there. So, God crossed my path at the right time with the right person. It doesn't work like that anymore. As you know, it's a long process with auditions and contacts and everything else. And 23 years ago, it just kind of fell into my lap, and it was a blessing. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity, and very, very grateful for the loyalty that ESPN has shown me over the years.
Yeah, I mean, they're a tremendous company. I have nothing bad to say about ESPN. I loved working there, and you do a great job with the work you're doing. But coaching to broadcasting and then back to coaching. So it was an interesting journey because you took a little bit of a hiatus from the broadcasting world from 2014 to 2017 to be the women's coach at Arkansas. So did coaching ever really leave your blood even when you were broadcasting? And then maybe what led into you going back to being a coach full time for the few years that you were back at Arkansas?
Yeah, I think if you lived in the college coaching world. It's always in your blood, And I was at a point in my life where I just really got before God with my wife. And when that job was offered to me here at my alma mater in my hometown, we took the time to really get quiet before the Lord and say, is this what you want for us? And it was very clear to me that God was calling me to that college campus. I didn't know for how long. I didn't know if we'd have success, not have success. That move didn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, to leave ESPN and the level that I was at the time, to get into the college women's game, which I'd never been a part of before. But I see now, looking back, why God did that, what he taught me, what he showed me, how he changed my heart, how he changed me as a person, how he's changed our family. We had success at Arkansas. We had failures at Arkansas, like every other coach does. But after 3 years and now returning back to ESPN, man, what just another blessing it was, even looking back through the hard times of that job and the things that God taught me and how he's grown my heart, my relationship with him, the compassion I have now for coaches is a whole nother level. The frustrations I know they deal with on a day-to-day basis are so much clearer to me. I know it made me a better analyst, maybe not so much in terms of the X's and O's of the game. I know I grew there as well. But just in terms of people and how college athletics worked and the big picture and the importance of administration and support and all the things that go into trying to build a winning program, my eyes were open to that to a whole nother degree. And ultimately, like I said, my grasp on God's hand was strengthened tremendously during that 3-year time, probably more so than had I never left ESPN. I was in a very comfortable position and I stepped out on a step of faith. And that's normally when God really grows you, is when you're in an uncomfortable spot and you're being stretched and stressed beyond what has been your norm. And for that, I'm very, very thankful.
Yeah, I can relate to that completely. We'll just say that in my journey. But when you were coaching the ladies, it was your first time coaching women's college basketball. Did it give you a greater appreciation of the women's game post coaching as you go back? Obviously, I think you mostly broadcast men's games, but did it give you a greater appreciation for the women and the athleticism and the way the game is played and just how great women's college basketball is too?
Well, I had a really good feel for that. ESPN's been producing and announcing the NCAA women's college basketball tournament for years.
Absolutely.
And guys like Fran Fraschilla and I on the men's side were some of the first male analysts to jump in there on the women's side and work that NCAA tournament. So, I knew how good the level of play was there and how dedicated those athletes are. It was great being back on a college campus for 3 years, just to be around all the athletes and all the different sports. I got to know a lot of the football players at Arkansas and baseball players and gymnasts and track athletes, and just to be around them in the training facility and the weight room and getting to have those relationships with those student athletes was really important to me. It still is now. I'm still in touch with a lot of them. So that was just time well spent. And the women's game is like the men's game. It just grows every year in terms of the quality of play and how good, fast, big, and strong athletes are these days.
Jimmy, walk me through a little bit about the line that you have to kind of toe as a coach, as a Christian coach, working for a university that isn't necessarily a Christian university, even if it is in Arkansas. But you see guys like Dabo Sweeney and certainly Tony Bennett, who I think do a wonderful job in the way that they live out their faith, but they're never forcing it on anybody. And certainly they're welcoming whoever is the most talented player. It's not discriminatory at all. But walk me through that line a little bit as a coach and as a believer, and kind of how those two mesh together when you were a coach and bringing that sort of into the coaching world.
Yeah, well, when I was in discussions of getting back into coaching, I made it very clear who I was, what I believed, what I was not going to waver from. but also made it very clear that I felt like I had good discernment in terms of how to go about it.
Yeah.
And, I was very active on social media about my faith and trying to encourage others. Before I got back into coaching, I stayed that way while I was coaching, and that way right now today. I think any platform that God gives us, we need to use. And I stayed very, very aggressive and very true to what I believe and what was important to me. I wanted people to know that, just like I told my family, that what I do is coach, but that's not who I am. And so many men get that mixed up. Their job, their work becomes who they are as opposed to what they do. And I was determined not to let that happen in my life. So I thought I did a solid job of keeping my faith driving who I am every day, keeping it in balance with working at a public university here in the state of Arkansas. I saw the impact that it had. I saw some pushback that it had at times, but it didn't deter me at all from my heart and what I knew God had called me to do and how I was trying to lead the program. So I just did daily things. I prayed with my staff every day before practice at midcourt. It was voluntary. They always understood that, but that's just how we were going to start every one of our practices. And so things like that, is what probably carried me through hard times and kept me humble in good times. But it is a balancing act, and I'm like you, man. I see Dabo and Tony and different guys. There's a bunch of them out there. Rick Barnes, Conzo Martin, Mark Few, Gus Malzahn, guys that are close to me that, they live their faith out. And that's the key. That's the key. Are you living it?
Yeah. Are you being real and transparent about it?
Yes.
Jimmy, let me ask you, times of transition come with everything. You've had a couple of these moments now where you kind of had to step out of faith or make pivots in your journey going from broadcasting to coaching back to broadcasting. How do you know from God when it is time to make that pivot into the next venture? A lot of people kind of walk through that world of patience, and they're wondering if the grass is greener and is God calling me here or there. What was that like for you, seeking the Lord and making the decisions that you made?
Well, I can just say how I did it. For me, I have to really take time to get quiet before God and read His written word, listen for His voice, respond to His guidance, and at the end of the day, make sure my heart is clear and clean when I ask God to provide for me what He knows is best for me, not what I want to do. And I've gone through probably 4 or 5 different things in my life, big decisions, pivots. I like that word you use.
Yeah.
That I've had to do that. I've had to say, God, don't let me do what I want to do, but place in my heart what You want me to do. And when I've done that and gone about it that way, man, things have always worked out. And I'm not saying things have always worked out in terms of I cut down the nets as a national champion coach when I was coaching for 3 years. But they've always worked out, and they've always been within His purpose for my life and His good and what He wanted for me. When I've gotten outside those barriers and I've just jumped and done things because I want to do it, and my thoughts, and I have all these reasons written down why this would be good, man, I can get in some hard, tough spots. So if I was encouraging anyone right now that's facing a right or a left turn in their life, on their path, whatever it is, I would just say, make sure that you get before God, you quiet your heart, and you ask Him to fill your heart with the desires that He knows is best for you. And when He does, it'll be clear, and then you act on those desires.
Yeah, that's really good advice, and I can say from firsthand experience, that's exactly what happened in my journey from leaving ESPN. Now, you mentioned tough moments and difficult things to seek the Lord about. This question might be simply for me, because we're both dads to teenage daughters. Mine is 15, a sophomore up here in Bristol, Connecticut at Bristol Central. Yours is 14. I'm guessing freshman or 8th grade. But what is that like right now for you, being a dad to a teenage girl? I'm really fascinated to hear kind of the journey that you're walking through, because it's probably very similar to mine.
Yeah, it can be a real challenge,
Yeah.
and it requires great purpose, priority, intentionality in my life. We have a tremendous relationship. I'm blessed with my career with ESPN. That she's an eighth grader right now at a junior high school here, and they were in need of a cross country coach this fall. So I'm her cross country coach.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, her season ends about 3 days before college basketball games begin. So that part works out. I'm able to spend hour to hour and a half with her every day after school with her friends, teammates, coaching her team, and then I'll do the same thing in the spring for track. So I have a built-in time with her every day. I think that's important. I've learned through the 3 years of coaching that when I'm home, I have to be engaged, man. I got to be plugged in. I can't be engaged with my phone and engaged with my family at the same time. So the phone comes out of my pocket, it's put on silent, and it's put down. I don't look at it again until we've accomplished what we want to accomplish as a family at night, and she's in bed, and then I can respond to whatever I need to respond to. But for so long, that phone dominated our family time at home, and that was wrong of me to do that. So I've grown out of that, and I've seen the relationship with my daughter and our whole family dynamic go to a whole nother level because of that communication that is so important to us. So
is she able to handle you as coach and as dad? Because that was a struggle for me with my daughter with softball. I was an assistant coach, but there were times when I would instruct her or teach her, and she'd be like, "Dad, just leave me alone." And I'm like, "Nope, this isn't dad speaking. This is coach speaking. And I'm trying to help you." Was that hard for you, coaching your daughter?
It's I wouldn't say it's hard, but it's something that I have to keep an awareness of.
Yeah.
I don't want to treat her any differently than I do any of those other student athletes that I'm around every day. But as a dad, you're going to have your eyes on your own kid probably a little bit more and in a little bit different view. So I'm very honest and open with her.
Yeah.
I just tell her, hey, when I'm out there, I'm your coach. I'm also your dad, and I'm going to be telling you things that you need to hear, not always what you want to hear. But I'm just coaching you. Don't take it personal. And she doesn't. She's grown from it. She learns. She knows that I can, have a toughness and a strength about me as a coach, motivating people. And she's adjusted that really well. But I spent a lot of time, Jason, talking with her about her heart for God and making sure that as much as I love sports, and it can be my life like it is yours and a lot of people listen right now. Like
Sure.
it can consume me. It has to at times. There's certain periods of my season in life that job is an all-consuming job with my thoughts. Okay, but I don't want to ever come across with her where she thinks that that's what's most important in my life. So we talk about it. We talk about it a lot, and I try to spend as much time or more challenging her with her walk with God and who she is in her school and how she's representing Him and her prayer life and all those things, far more than her being a competitive gymnast that she is or a cross country runner.
That's awesome. Have you guys seen the movie Overcomer? Were you able to take her to see that?
Oh yeah, loved it.
Great movie, right?
Yeah, the whole family went, and that's there's a really strong message there for anyone, whether you're a fan of sports or not. Just the will of a person and the heart that God can give someone to really carry you to different levels and break down barriers that you never thought you could break down.
Yeah, the cross country parallels were what made me think of that too when you said you were coaching her in cross country. So great stuff. Jimmy, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Our last question, we ask this question to all of our guests here on the podcast. What is God teaching you today? What are you learning from the Lord where He has you today in the season of life that you're in?
Contentment. I think that's a word that a lot of men probably really struggle with because society and our culture is so loud and relentless with its voice about success and money and moving up the ladder and work, and all the different voices that are screaming at us. And I'm all about that. I mean, you know me, I'm a competitive guy. I'm all about those things, but
Sure.
God is really starting to teach me about contentment and trust that he has me where he wants me. I'm responsible for where he has me, and to keep it all in balance. So contentment and proper balance in my life is where I can quickly struggle if I don't keep that before God and let him continue to mold me and shape me in those two areas. But staying grateful for what I have and keeping my eyes on that as opposed to having my eyes on what I don't have yet. Those are probably the 2 or 3 key things right now that God seems to be speaking to me more about than the other 973 things he's trying to work on me.
It's so true. Jimmy Dykes, ESPN college basketball analyst. Jimmy, thanks so much for being here on the show. Thanks for sharing your journey and your story with us. And we'll do it again, hopefully sometime soon. Thanks again.
Hi, Jason.
Many thanks to Jimmy Dykes for joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Love talking to him. He had some great stories, and I love the synergy that we have as dads to teenage girls. It's a journey. It's a new ordeal every day, it seems like, but I love being a dad to my little girl, and we have a great relationship as well. So glad to have Jimmy here on the show. Give him a follow on Twitter at Coach Jimmy Dykes. Let him know that you heard his story here on Sports Spectrum, and hopefully we'll have him back on again, because there's always something to talk about that is either sports related, especially college basketball, and certainly what's intersecting to faith in Jesus Christ. So many thanks to Jimmy Dykes for being here on Sports Spectrum. Thanks to you for listening. We told you about it in the beginning. Our website, sportspectrum.com, a great place to go to gather content every single day on the intersection of sports and faith. We're looking for ideas as well, ideas of guests, ideas of stories to cover. Big-time college basketball, small-time college basketball, high school, middle school, athletes, coaches, broadcasters, whatever it may be. If you have a story that you think we should be featuring here on Sports Spectrum, whether it's on the podcast or the website, email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. Thank you so much for listening. We love you guys. We'll see you next time with a new episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. Have a great rest of your day.